Welcome. Thank you for joining me. I am here to speak about the escalating violence and violent rhetoric in the United States, particularly in the wake of the murder assassination of Charlie Kirk. What I want to say at the get-go is that I decry this action. This man did not deserve to be killed, should not have been killed. It is never okay for anybody to be killed because of the expression of their personal beliefs, ideology, their political positions or expressions, no matter how abhorrent. Violence is not the way to solve our problems. And yet here we are. Here we are. And increasingly, we are seeing that the current president of the United States and those surrounding him and supporting him, whether they believe in what he is doing or not, whether they are being driven by fear for their own well-being or the well-being of their family, or by their own greed, or simply by their own ignorance. It is never okay. We are at a very pivotal turning point, not just in this country, but in human history. I am here to speak as a healer, as an educator, social scientist, as an activist, and as someone who is in spiritual leadership. I want to talk about what it really means to be a healer and to be in spiritual leadership, and to answer the question, what can we do? Or should we be doing anything? Or are we doing enough? And believe me, this is a question that I have been asking myself over the past 8 years, and which has, of course, those questions have been getting even more intense within me, particularly in the past 8 months, 10 months. However, I will amend that because the intensity of these questions also has been within me ever since Russia invaded Ukraine and ever since Israel began perpetrating a terrible genocide on the Palestinian peoples, triggered by a deeply horrible, horrific, inexcusable event when Hamas came in and murdered and kidnapped innocent Israeli civilians. So what I am establishing here right at the get-go is that I do not condone violence. I do not condone murder, and I do not also condone violence as a response, as an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, if that is even what we can call what is going on in Israel, with Israel and Palestine. That is a complicated topic that I'll speak about later. As a healer, as an empath, as a person who seeks to be compassionate and kind, and to honor my commitment to walk a path of love, to speak love, to do my own inner healing work, to enter into the deep shadows within myself, and to make those shadows conscious so that they do not drive me to doing things, saying things, or acting in ways that perpetuate this soul sickness of violence, whether on subtle or overt levels, what I say is that this inner work is extremely important right now. Our inner work is extremely important right now. In fact, for me, it has become even more important because when I find myself personally overwhelmed or afraid or angry, or even a part of me that feels, yes, hatred, I find myself in that place, and then I step back, because that is a place that then could, as it could for anybody, draw me into participating in the soul sickness of the transgenerational violence and harm that human beings have been doing to one another. That is one of the most important first steps that we can take. I love humanity, despite our failures, our weaknesses, despite the violence that has marred our history, our actions. And I include humanity as a whole in this statement, because when we look back at human history, there is not a single culture, or there may be, let me just say, I'm going to qualify that. There probably have been, and there are documented cases that historians and anthropologists have documented societies that are very, very peaceful. They do exist. They have existed. They will always exist. And there has been violence for many millennia. Now, the history that I am most familiar with is the violence that has, the soul sickness that has arisen and manifested in violence among white people, people that we would characterize culturally as Europeans. And that soul sickness that is manifested in violence goes back so many generations and has in fact been delivered on the doorsteps, on the lands that belong to other peoples. And what we are seeing now is all of this trauma, this transgenerational legacy of harm coming to a fulcrum. And it gives us once again an opportunity to make a different choice. And I, as a healer, a social scientist, and a sacred activist and a spiritual leader, not to thousands upon thousands, but to a small group of people. What I also understand is that my job is to keep talking about this, because being spiritual doesn't mean to look away. And in truth, as a white woman, I probably do have the privilege to some degree to cocoon myself and look away. That being said, women of all colors are being targeted here in the United States. We are being targeted. The autonomy to be in control of procreation of our bodies, the autonomy, the sovereignty to live the lives that we choose to live, as opposed to being constrained within old, ancient ideas about conventional roles and jobs of women. So, but My spirituality, I feel, mirrors the spirituality and the morality of some of the great spiritual leaders who have spoken truth about harm, about the misuse of power, about violence in all its forms. And I think about Gandhi, I think about King, I think about Nelson Mandela and others who have been nominated for or have won the Nobel Peace Prize. And there are so many, many more. There are so many more like them, where their spirituality is a spirituality of love, and that inasmuch as they loved the world, they were called to step up, even at the risk of their own lives, to call for loving ways of being, loving action, whereby no single group of people, by virtue of their religion, their race, their culture, their ethnicity, and nowadays we can include their sexual orientation, also, of course, their gender, to be targeted for harm, for exclusion, to be targeted for genocide. I also actually have been thinking a lot about Jesus. Yes, I was, in fact, raised by my family when I was a little girl in the Episcopal Church. And yes, I felt a connection to Jesus. I knew him to be a beautiful being of light who is filled with love. And there are two things I think about as I work with my own process when I find myself caught in fear or anger. And not just anger, I mean anger that could fester within me, because there is such a thing as healthy, righteous anger. But we have to know how to use anger skillfully in service of love, in service of love, not in service of doing harm or perpetrating violence or objectifying others through name-calling or any other way that this soul sickness happens. But I think about Jesus as the words that he said, which is, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." And I do know there is a deep truth in this, because people who have not awakened, who are caught in the denial of their own shadow, and therefore are driven unconsciously by fear, by greed, by old soul contracts from other lives, and therefore are projecting out on others this own unowned shadow, their own murderous intentions and feelings, their own rage and hatred, arising out of their own unhealed wounds and the legacies of trauma in their own family lines that have never been admitted to, healed, or addressed. The truth is that I know they do not know what they do, and that they are like children, not yet fully mature and developed. And I don't mean this to be patronizing. I mean this just to acknowledge where they are in terms of their self-awareness and consciousness. And indeed, the President of the United States acts like a child, acts like a toddler. And so he is a mere reflection of that part of us that has not moved on beyond that place within us, and that also has never been tended to lovingly. It does not excuse his actions because he is an adult, he is a grown-up, and he has had the power and continues to have the power to do great harm, and he is doing great harm to many people. There is a power in speaking the truth. I became a healer because I woke up to the truth of the abuse in my family by my deeply troubled mother, the abuse of myself. I speak only for myself. And in order to heal, we have to speak the truth. In order to change the course of our own lives, we have to tell the story. And in order to change the course of history, humanity's destiny lines into a better future, a more peaceful future, where we work through our differences and conflicts in nonviolent ways, we have to speak the truth. And as a healer, I hold this truth about my own life, this truth about my clients' lives, this truth about all of our lives. What happened to Charlie Kirk is wrong. And the assassination of the politicians in Minnesota, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on their names right now. None of it should have happened. But it has happened. And so I sit here feeling the pain of it and knowing that the only way to begin to heal myself, to heal this nation, to heal my sisters and brothers in this country, is to start speaking the truth. What is happening, what is being done to people of color in this country, to immigrants, is wrong. It is a continuation of a genocide that started 500 years ago. It is a soul sickness that is not yet healed, and I personally want to be part of that transformation. May it be so. Aho, Wado.